I love Block of the Month, and I have done Block of the Month for probably 20 years. I started at Cabin Fever in early 2000s, and when they closed the doors, I hunted for a Block of the Month and went to Quilter's Corner and did Quilter's Corner, and then when I was riding my bike through town, I thought, that's a quilt shop. So I stopped and I said, you guys need to do a Block of the Month. So I think we've done 4. This will be the 4th Block of the Month here. And I just think Block of the Month is great because it's manageable. You get your fabrics, your pattern, and you go home and you have all month to do 3 blocks. A lot of times Block of the Month is Block of the Month, but on a quilt this size, we had to put a little bit more into it. Which brings me to the quilt, and I wanted to go over how it's going to, the program's going to run. So I'm going to come over here to this quilt. And so for January, February, March, excuse me, we're going to do these 9 center blocks, which I have up there. So you're gonna do 1, 2, 3 this month, and then in February you'll do 3 more, and in March you'll do the last 3. So the center of your quilt will be done, and that's the difficult part. The rest is going to be just a piece of cake. So then in month 4 and 5, April and May, you're going to make the Ohio stars. So you'll make 6 one month, and you'll make 6 the other month. And there's going to be some technique in this. We want this plaid to line up. So when we get there, I'll kind of go over how we'll make this block. But for now, we're just going to concentrate on these 9 for the next 3 months. But I just want to kind of give you a breakdown of how this quilt's going to go together. And then we'll be in month 5. We'll be April and May, and then in June we're going to make these 4 a 4 patch inside of a it's almost like a log cabin, and there'll be some tricks to how these go in there, and I'll be able to point that out. And again, we'll go over it in May. But when I made this block, I was making this block here, and I thought, oh no, it doesn't matter how it goes together because it all just looks the same, until I had it all done, and this needed to point into the quilt, and it pointed out of the quilt. So we'll talk about that in May. So then, let's see, that was June. And then in July, we're going to make 4 of the houses. And when we make the houses, we will make, there's 4 blue ones, 4 brown ones, 4 red ones, and 4 purple ones. So, just keep my, in July, we're gonna make, and I don't know the colors, we're gonna make 4 blue, 4 brown, and then in August, we'll make 4 red and 4 purple, or whatever. And then, your houses will all be done. And what I did when I was making this quilt is I got one of those great big long tubs that go under the bed, and as I finished the portion of it, because this doesn't go together until you're all done. So I would make all of these blocks and put them in the tub, and then I made all the Ohio stars and put them in the tub. So you just put your pieces away, and then the following month, after we've made the houses, we're gonna make 40 of these little pinwheels. So that month, you'll just make 40 pinwheels. And then in October, month 10, we're gonna start on the sashing. And you're gonna make 40 of the beige, and you're gonna make 70, I think it's 76 of the yellow. And then just put them in the tub. And then the very last month in November, you're gonna cut all of your cornerstones. You're gonna cut all of these pieces your 4 in the corner, and then all of the red cornerstones. And then in December, we're gonna put it all together. And you start up in the corner, and you just go down. Put this piece on, you put the red on the sashing, and then you put this piece on, and then you just go row by row. And you'll get panicked because you'll think something's upside down because houses down there are going up, but get a design wall, lay it in the living room floor. But in December of next year, we'll be putting this all together. So that's how the program's gonna run.
So it goes together in strips this way, across?
Yes, it starts up in that corner.
Rows? Okay,
And
then they go.
then they go this way. Yeah.
Diagonal.
On the diagonal, yeah.
Okay.
Just come all the way down. I put a couple rows together at the top. I had it all laid out. And then I brought a couple of rows up this way, and then I went down the center and started putting it together. I didn't want to keep going one direction.
Right.
So I put the center one together, and then I added these 2, and then I did down to the Ohio Star, and then I added those. But we can talk about that in December next year when you have all this done. So that's just kind of a rundown of how it's gonna go. But for this month, we're just gonna focus on this block, and you're gonna make 3 of them. And then we're gonna talk about the block now.
So Shirley, is there fabric for air?
Probably not.
Not in the kit, but I do have extra
There's
here.
extra fabric.
Okay.
And there's a couple things that I need to mention. You're getting a strip in this kit, and it's the plaid. And it is this piece right here. Oops, I probably shouldn't put that right there. And it is the center, unfortunately not the demo I did, but it is the center of 8 of the blocks. The center block is the black, but all of these around the outside of the black one, this is the center fabric, and you have the fabric for all 8 this month.
Okay.
And there's a couple of fabrics in there. If you have an abundance of the fabric, don't get rid of any of your fabric, keep it all together, because you'll be using it in other blocks. Like for instance, this little tiny piece of yellow may be in your first block, so we gave you with the fabric, and it'll be used maybe in a tiny portion of another block. For instance, it's here in this block, and I cut out a second block, and it's just this little tiny piece. So we've given you the width of fabric. So just don't throw any of your fabric away, because it may be used in a later block.
I believe it says in your patterns that this is also going to be used for here and here. So that's not extra, so it's for your blocks coming.
And I don't know which ones those are, because mine came as a kit. So I had all of the fabric at one time, and so I was using it and putting it aside. And I use a little drying rack sometimes to loop my fabric over so that I could keep track of my fabric.
And do notice that she has everything labeled. And where did you get those labels, Shirley?
I actually might have a copy here that you could make a copy.
I'll make some copies, yes. You just want to label everything so you know where it goes.
I actually got it here, so it may be in the computer.
Okay.
But because I cut everything before I even started to sew, I labeled everything, and they were in baggies.
So you're organized.
Well, I had to be with this. There was so
She
much
had all
fabric.
of it at once.
I had a couple of those are 4 or 5 yards. I think the largest was 3.5 yards. That's a lot of fabric to manage. When the red was used in the beginning blocks in the Ohio Star, it was the chimneys for the houses, it was the flanging, it was the binding. So, and I had a massive amount of that fabric, so I had to like mark up, okay, I'm gonna need this much for this one and this much for this one. So just keep all of your scraps.
Did you say that flannel That's not for the first three?
Yes, it
Oh, it
is.
is for the, okay.
Yes.
So, but we have enough for all of them?
You have
Yes.
enough for all
Oh,
8.
okay.
So if
This
you,
strip.
yes, if you wanna take that and square it up and cut 8 2.5-inch squares, it'll be for the
That
center.
block.
8 or 9?
Yeah.
Well,
The middle one's
there's
different.
9 blocks, but the center block is black, and I did the sample as the center.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And you'll get fabric for that one as well, but this is for 8 of the centers. And this fabric gets used again, throughout the quilt. So, when you get started and you cut, don't pay attention, this is kind of my samples I'll show you later. This is the block when you get it cut. So you're gonna have your center. This is your centerpiece here. It's a 2.5-inch square. And you're gonna have N, and this is gonna be the same. And it's gonna, even on the black and all your other ones, those are your 4 outside pieces. So when I get started, I put my center down and my 4 outside pieces, which are these. Then I grab my double flying geese, and my double flying geese are, I take this piece here and I use this little tool here, and I line it up and I make my lines, and when I stitch just inside my lines. I cut my little goose apart, and I end up with this. And I press these open, and I end up with this. I end up with 2 of these. I take my, I don't have the line on it, but I put this here. I put the line on before I pin it. So I do the same technique. I put the line, I pin it, stitch just inside, and then you cut that one and you press it open, and you'll have 4 flying geese. And at this time, I use my little flying geese ruler. And you just lock them right up into your seams. And I cut, 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 and cut. And then I have my flying geese. And when you do this technique, there's a little extra fabric, so you can trim it off and it's nice and square. You end up with a nice square. Then D gets placed, put a line right through the center, and you put it right here and pin it, and I try to stay right on that line, and I go nice and slow. And then when you press it open, then you go in here and you trim this back. You end up with this unit, which is called a double flying geese.
No, I'm overwhelmed already.
Never mind.
Just take
Okay,
your time.
does it say what size D is?
Yes.
It tells you what size
Yes,
you're
so,
cutting D.
I think
And
I'll
you're
start
laying
with
it
the
on-
scrap material.
Will it be on the
Try one.
template there too?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the Lynn Weiler, I sat through her demo. She takes these pieces and she glues them to this. It isn't the technique I used. I mounted this right in front of me on my wall, on my sewing machine, right in front of my sewing machine. And I used this. So what I did was, when I get started, I place these 4 are not going to be cut. and this one. So I place those there, and then these little guys, this will all stay the same. This block will all stay the same. I stick these in the corner, and those are O and E.
So as you cut them, as you're going, you fill
Well,
up.
I cut the whole block, and then I take this little design mat here, and I place the pieces that are not going to be recut. So that, I start with that, and I know that this is my double flying geese, so I put it together. I know this is my 8 at a time, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and this is my 8 at a time. And this is my little crazy unit at the bottom. Actually, I'm sorry, that goes over here. So this, and I'll explain this little piece, and that's this little guy. And I'll explain him in a minute. So when I start the block, I put those pieces out, and I make my flying geese. And then I place them in their position. Then I start with these half square triangles, which are done 8 at a time. So I take, and I use this tool again, and I make my lines that direction and that direction. And again, I sew just inside the line. Then I go and I cut it, and when I cut, I made the blue lines for you. So I cut this direction and this direction, and I just grab my ruler, and I know this is going to be a 2.5, and I just want to make sure that my ruler dissects those lines both directions, and then I cut the square apart, and I end up with my little half square triangles, 8 of them, and I end up, well, this is the bigger size. So let's just start with these, and then I get my, now Lynn recommends the 5.5 inch. I'm all about easy. So if you have a 5.5 inch, you can do this. You just lock your block, but it's a little more difficult. You want to make sure that you have 1.5. You want to have fabric hanging off, and you want fabric over here, and you will. You can trim, then you have to pick the ruler up, turn it around, and then you need to line this right up with the 1.5, and then trim it again.
So how are you lining that up? It grabs the seam? Is there a
Yes.
hole in the center? Okay.
And when they say lock, it locks.
To the top.
See how it slides right in there? And if you used a regular ruler, it would kind of,
moves.
yeah, it would kind of wobble. So this really locks. I was lazy, and so I bought the 1.5, and I just locked it in and went around all 4 sides. And I did the same with the 2.5.
So you're trimming it down to 1.5 inch.
It'll be a 1.5 inch square, and that's what this little guy is right here, a 1.5 inch square.
And the pattern tells us that,
Yes,
the size.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And so I, after my little goose are there, I put my 8 little half square triangles in place. And now all I have to do is my 2.5 inch, and I do the same thing. Cut it, and then I end up with 8 of these little units. I put them on the mat. I kind of center it over so that I know that I'm going to have a nice clean point on both sides, and I just trim all the way around. But if you only have the 5.5, you can do the same thing. You lock it in there, slide it down, make sure that you look at your 2.5 inch, and if you've got fabric hanging over, and it's going to be between a 1/16 and an 1/8 inch of fabric, and then you trim 2 sides, turn your block around and trim the other 2 sides. So you can do it with the 5.5 or the little guys. I'm lazy. And then,
It seems like
Some
you
of
make
them,
less error if you use the 1.5.
well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I just don't wanna make more mistakes. I thought it was
If
lazy.
if it slides, I mean,
If it does, yeah.
when you turn it.
Well, it could slide even on the 2.5, you just have to really be careful. So then I place, my trimmed out 2.5 inch squares all the way around. Then I need to make the last unit, which is this guy. And this guy is made with, you'll start with your square, and you're gonna make this unit first. So it's gonna get sewn like this, so you'll have this little guy that looks just like that. And it explains it in there.
Do you use scant quarter on all of that?
It was a 1/4 inch.
Okay.
I used a 1/4. And the little tool that she uses, Lynn, she trims off the corners and lines them up like this. And if you don't want to purchase the tool and you don't want to cut the corners off like she recommends, you can do the old school way of pinching the center and pinching the center of this one and lining them up this way. But this unit's going to be made by putting the half square triangle on that way and like that. Then you're going to take and put 2 half square triangles together, and you're going to put them, you'll lock your seams and put it together like that, and then you take your last piece and put it in the corner. And that is this unit right here. And so then, when you make all 4 of these, then that's when I go to the sewing machine. And then I have that on my wall, and I follow this to the T. And I start up in the corner, and I grab these 2 pieces, pin them, sew them, and press them open right then. And she tells you, I want them to go, and it goes the opposite of what you would think. You would think that you'd be opening it to the flat side, but you don't. So you have to follow her directions. And I press it open, I lay it down, and I grab these 2 pieces, press them in just like she says, and then so these units get put together pretty much the same. So you could go, I'm just gonna sew these together, and I'm gonna sew these together. However you choose to do it, you're gonna put this row together, and then you're gonna put the center row. And when you do the center row, you're gonna press that seam open. And she shows you. You just follow this. She shows you that she wants this center seam opened, which is not typical in a lot of quilts. And when I press open, I use these 2, and I use my clapper a lot when I'm sewing. When I press a seam open, I use this, and I'll just demo maybe a little bit bigger.
Which I
piece.
have ordered, but they have not sent me yet.
She
They're back
recommends
ordered.
this little tool, and it's water and a little drop of a solution that comes with it, and you just run it down your seam, and it just gives the thread a little bit of room to go somewhere. And then I open it up, big end here, and then I just put my iron down, and I use this to keep things open as I'm ironing. My thumb is the iron, and then I just iron it open, then I turn it around and I iron it again. And that's going to be for these center seams in the first 9 blocks.
When you folded that over the first time, did you just eyeball that, or did you have it marked at a?
It's stitched.
Oh, it was already, okay, yes, okay.
Yeah.
So then do you sew all 3 blocks at the same time, meaning all the pieces, and lay them out all 3?
I did one at a time.
Okay.
I think it would just be, it seemed like the production went I'm gonna cut everything out first. And then I grabbed a baggie and I went in and I would open the baggie and I would immediately start with making what I called, what do I call them? I had a name for them. But I would get my pieces put together. So I would make my 8 at a time, 2.5 inch squares, and I'd make 8 of a time of my 1.5 inch squares, get them pressed, cut, and lay it all out before I even began to sew it. And then I would finish that block, press it open, and then the other thing that I really recommend is, these blocks are 10.5 inches. Are they 10.5 inches?
That's a 12-inch board, I think.
I'm almost sure they're 10.5 inches, I believe, finished. Yes, 10.5 inches. I trimmed them out. I would get them out on the, I didn't wanna move on unless there was an issue, so I laid my 10.5 inch and get them all squared and trimmed out and then put them away and then moved on to the next block.
So what is the advantage of the little curved thing that you use?
It just, if you've ever tried to, I mean, if you have a wool mat, it'll work too. The advantage of this is to press a seam open, because it allows the seam to actually open and you really get a good press on it.
Okay, thank you.
And ladies, to let you know, we got this, I think, from somewhere.
When Lynn came here.
Oh.
Yeah.
So she's got a website there, and she talks about
Yes.
sewing the different pieces of this quilt.
Um,
She doesn't talk about, I'm not sure if she talks about all of them, but
She will. She'll add them as she goes. This
she
is
has tutorials.
this
Yeah,
is her
she does.
tutorial, and I followed her tutorial. And I made my block just like she did. I stayed right with everything that she told me to do, the 8 at a time.
So can you go online and print that?
Yes.
And you
That's on her
printed out that
blog.
whole, is that what because she said that night, print out my blog, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
And
what?
then
I
she
didn't know what she
has
meant.
this blog here is for your first 3 months.
Okay, yeah, and I watched just a couple of them,
No, by the time you sew
and
them
she
all together,
explains
it's 10.5 inches.
Yeah.
the different pieces, her components.
Components.
That's what she calls
That's-
them, yeah.
I made sure that
components.
I had all my components and they were all trimmed to size before I even began to sew them together. And that's how I did mine.
Quarter, quarter, quarter.
Cool.